Welcome back to the Bama Tailgate Show, Alabama and ULM at Bryant-Denny Stadium, 6:45 Central Time as the Crimson Tide try to bounce back after a tough loss to Florida State last week, and maybe a cultural shift that we're going to talk about with our next guest, Chris Lowe. I want to remind you guys, though, that we really appreciate the gang at Black Belt Outdoor. They're in the heart of the Black Belt region of Alabama. Yeah, and you're going, who are they? Well, they're a digital billboard company, and they got you covered for all your needs. Our guy Brad has taken care of us since day one, and he'll take care of you as well. Over 13 different counties in central Alabama. It's so cool to drive around and see Jake Coker and my face up on those billboards as they remind all of you guys about the show each week. And maybe we should put Chris Lowe on there one of these shows as well. This segment is brought to you by Visit Sevierville and the Smoky Mountains. Smoky Mountain Harvest Festival is September 19th through October 31st this year, which means creative fall displays throughout Sevierville and fall-themed events, as well as brilliant fall colors in the trees. Peak leaf viewing is typically mid-October through mid-November. Find out more at visitsevierville.com/fall. And so Chris is a guy that lives right near the Smoky Mountains, but it's always good to see Chris Lowe from On 3. Week 1 and On 3, how'd it go?
Great. First of all, they don't want my ugly mug on any bulletin boards or any sides of anything. So let's get that out there for the record, Mick. No, it's been great. It was great to be at Clemson LSU, great football game. I don't know that it was certainly an offensive fireworks type show, but a lot of really good players that are going to be playing at the next level in that game. Physical, hard-hitting, big plays on defense. Harold Perkins looks like he's healthy again, which is probably bad news for everybody else in the SEC. But no, it's been great, and I really look forward to a lot of trips, a lot of going to places to tell stories for On 3, and that's sort of, as you know, that's what I love doing most, and it's been a lot of fun. I look forward to many more years of covering college football for On 3.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations to you. We talked about that last week. All right, let's talk Alabama. Got a lot to get into. You and Andy Staples wrote a story about basically and I agree with you guys. I think that there is definitely, I don't want to say it's a panic, but there's a lot of concern right now in Bama Nation about Kalen DeBoer, where this football program is since Nick Saban. I'm not surprised, Chris. I'm not. I mean, this is what we saw trending at the end of last year. I talked about it on the show last week. I don't want it to be this way, but the Alabama I saw against Oklahoma, the Alabama I saw against Michigan is the same Alabama I saw against Florida State. What are you guys hearing? And when you did your research on with talking to boosters, some of the big money people behind Alabama, what was their thoughts and concerns about the program right now?
A couple things. I don't know anybody that I've talked to that is rooting against Kalen DeBoer or wants to see Kalen DeBoer fail. I mean, if you know Kalen, if you spend any time with him, just a terrific guy. I mean, he is a principled guy. He's smart. He's sincere. I did not or have not run across anybody who wants to see him not make it at Alabama. Now, number two, there is a pattern that has developed. It's not just one game, as you pointed out. It's not just two games. Really, 3 of their last 4 games, this has been an Alabama football team. I don't know that you put a lot of stock in bowl games. So one of those games was the Michigan game. But 3 out of the last 4 games, it's been an Alabama football team that's looked uninspired. They haven't played with a lot of toughness. They've not been able to score points. They've given up a lot of yards in the run game, and just a lack of focus, Mick. I don't know. They looked hesitant against Florida State. I know some people say they loafed or they didn't hustle. I'm not as quick to say someone loaf because I don't know. But when you watch them play, they didn't look instinctive. They didn't look, as I said, is what you're used to seeing Alabama look like. And I think that's the thing as I talk to people. And again, I'm not talking to people that maybe give $200 or $300 a year to the school. I'm talking about people who have given generously over years to the school, who love that university, who take a lot of pride in that university, what they've done in football, even long before Nick Saban, that are worried. They're genuinely concerned about what they've seen. Now, that doesn't mean that they're ready to push Kalen DeBoer out the door. I think as I wrote, that's absurd to think one game into a guy's second season, it's time to make a change. I don't think that at all. I think the thing that we probably all need to take, wrap our hands around is simply this, is what do they do? How does that team respond? How do they bounce back the rest of this year? And probably most importantly, can he get them to respond? Because to this point, for whatever reason, they have just not responded on a consistent basis to Kalen and that coaching staff. I mean, he takes over what in my mind is probably one of the toughest assignments any coach in football has taken on in the last decade plus, coming in for a Nick Saban. And so much of coaching and doing it well is getting your team, your players to respond, pressing the right buttons with your team. And for whatever reason, that hasn't worked. And I want to add this. I've been fortunate enough to watch practice at Alabama. I've seen that team practice on multiple occasions. I was there the week before they opened, or 2 weeks before they opened the season. It's not Club Med, man. They get after it. They're physical. There's a lot of good tempo in the practice field. You've got leaders calling people out, holding guys accountable. There was nothing that I saw in that practice that I was at that would make me think that team would play the way they did against Florida State. So anybody who says that his style or his approach, they're not getting after him, they don't know what they're talking about, because practice has been very good. They're just not playing at a level that I think anybody that loves that university or school or any fan would expect them to play at.
That's a good point. And as we talked to Chris Lowe on the Bama Tailgate Show, I want to remind you guys that if you're listening on radio across the state of Alabama on Game Day Roll Tide, and for those of you that are watching right now on the Bama Tailgate YouTube channel, make sure that you like and subscribe and get in the comment section. He's done, and his staff have really done everything else really well. The recruiting's been top notch. It's not like they've taken a big step back there. I think that DeBoer has taken time for the media, way more than Nick Saban did. I mean, he's been on this tailgate show before, and he is a great guy. And I think we're all pulling for him. You're saying that the team looked good in practice and they look prepared, but when they get into the games, particularly the road games, there just has been such a lack of effort. And, we use the term soft. I've heard it all week that Bama is soft. I hope that's not the case. I mean, I know we're in this NIL and transfer portal era. These guys are paid, but the effort certainly hasn't been there in these road games. How can he get it fixed? Does anybody have an idea? Do you have an idea? Have you talked to anybody that has an idea? Because if it doesn't get fixed, life's going to be very unhappy for he and his staff around Tuscaloosa and Alabama.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's nirvana right now, Mick. Again, the numbers. What was the old Parcells line that you are what your record says you are?
Yep.
They're 5-5 in their last 10 games. I mean, Nick went from 2016 to 2020 and lost 5 games. And I know I'm that guy when I say that. Well, Nick did this or Nick did that. And that's not fair. But that's sort of what you walk into when you replace a guy like Nick Saban. You're always going to be compared to him, how your teams play, how they don't play, what you wear on the sidelines, what you say behind the microphone in press conferences, what your players carry into the stadium before a game. Everything is going to be scrutinized, everything. And the truth is, if Alabama were 9-1 in those last 10 games and they had won Saturday, let's say they had just gotten to the playoff last year, we wouldn't be here right now. Nobody would be talking about what kind of shirt Kalen wears or what his players were carrying into the stadium. I mean, I've heard all sorts of crazy stuff that players were doing this or DoorDash before the games. Don't think for a minute, and I'm not saying that happened because I don't believe it did, first of all. But don't think for a minute that there haven't been those kind of problems at Alabama when Nick was there or at tons of other schools. When I say problems, those kind of things happening. But guess what? Those rumors crop up when you lose. They don't crop up when you win back-to-back national titles. They don't crop up when you beat Auburn X amount of straight years. They crop up when you lose football games. And that's part of it. How do they get it fixed? I think the first thing they got to do is they've got to be more consistent. They've got to be able to take teams out of games early. And that's what they were so good at under Nick is and all great teams, not just Nick Saban teams, is no matter who you're playing, you go after them early, you step on the throat, and they know that it's going to be a long day. And when you look at Bama and some of the games they've lost under Kalen, they've gotten down. They've had to come back. I mean, they've turned the football over. Now, that wasn't the case Saturday, which may be the most disconcerting thing to Alabama fans. That wasn't a fluky type of loss. I mean, when you go and you get 200 yards on the ground put up against you, usually you're going to lose. When you can't run for, what they run for, 80 yards or something like that,
yeah,
you can't run the football, you're probably going to lose. When you have a game and the opponent throws 14 passes, here's the stat that blows me away. Florida State threw 14 passes in that game, completed 9, and won the football game. That tells me, number one, you get beaten pretty badly up front in the line of scrimmage. And I think those are the things that, you asked me, I'm not a football coach. Kalen and that staff know a lot more about their team than I do. But you got to start winning more battles up front on defense and on offense. And they've got the personnel and the talent to do that. I will say this, if you want to look at everything, not having Tim Keenan there in the middle of that defensive line is a huge blow to them. He was their guy. He's their enforcer there in the middle of what they do. So having him out, looks like he's going to be out again for a week or so. They do feel like they'll get him and Jam Miller back, their top running back, for Georgia, which would be, I think, really critical. But they've just got to start pushing people around and not let people push them around anymore on defense, because that's where you win. And that's where Alabama has always won when they've been at their best.
Yeah, they need more dogs, Chris.
You got my dog barking in the back.
Yeah, your dog
he didn't
barking.
like your
And he's
question,
right.
by the
They
way.
need more dogs. Well, to just kind of wrap this up, Greg Byrne needs to have this team win because he's in the crosshairs right now. You're not going to get rid of DeBoer with that big contract. But I'll tell you what, somebody's going to pay the price if Alabama continues down this road. 5-5 in their last 10 games, 1-4 in their 1-3 in their last 4 games. Not up to the standard. He's the one that brought in Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer is protected by his contract, but Greg Byrne isn't.
This isn't Greg's first rodeo. He's been around. He's been an AD in different conferences. He was an AD in the SEC before. We met back at Mississippi State. So I don't know that he is. I'm sure he's worried and concerned. I don't know that he's just absolutely shocked that people are mad and upset when Alabama doesn't win or play substandard football. But no, he's invested totally. Kalen DeBoer is his hire. And right from the get-go, it was Mike Norvell, Kalen DeBoer, Mike Norvell, depending on who you want to listen to. But those were his 2 guys, and he went and got one of his 2 guys. And granted, Kalen didn't have any SEC experience. He'd not been in this part of the country before recruiting and coaching, and some people pointed that out. But having talked to Greg right after that hire, he did a lot of homework. He'd been doing homework. I think he knew Nick had given him a heads up the year before that it was going to be on a year-to-year basis, whether or not he came back. So Greg was smart enough to start doing his homework, talking to people, sort of having that proverbial short list in his drawer. And I think all along he liked what Kalen DeBoer had done. He liked his offensive background. So, yeah, he's totally invested in his hire. This is his hire. And Greg told me, and I wrote about it, that he sort of looked back and read and was old enough to remember, although he's not nearly as old as I am. Nobody is. This was the type of hire that was going to be akin to when UCLA had to replace John Wooden. Mm-hmm. And Gene Bartow came in there and had some decent success, but 2 years was it. That's all he could stand. He left, went to UAB. And not that Greg was sort of forecasting something like that happened, but he understood that when you hire someone to go in after a Nick Saban, that is a daunting task. As I said earlier, maybe the toughest job a coach has faced in replacing another coach, since I've been covering college football. And he knew there was going to be some rough patches. He knew there was going to be that constant scrutiny in comparison to Nick. I think all that is, he knew that, and I don't think he's totally shocked by the fact that Alabama fans and boosters and donors and all the above are upset. But I think Greg would be the first to agree that this is not what anybody there feels like is the standard for Alabama football. And
Mm-mm.
they got to get back. And I can't emphasize this enough. And I know people read stuff and they hear stuff and they sort of read into it what they want to, and they hear what they want to. This is what I want to say definitively. Let's judge Kalen DeBoer on what he does going forward. Let's see if he can get this team back, how his team responds to him, to the staff. They got a lot of opportunities to get back into the quote-unquote playoff chase. They got a lot of opportunities to prove that they are a championship caliber team. I will also say that we don't have, and I said this in my article, we don't have any tangible proof on the field at this point that they are a championship caliber program right now, and that really eats at the Alabama people.
Yeah. Well, you talk to some of the boosters at Alabama, the people that make that make things roll. With the way that the world is now and the money. How confident are they that this can get turned around, or what's the ultimatum if it does?
Well, last impressions are what count the most, certainly with fans, and they haven't seen a lot in the last 10 games, certainly the last 5 games that would give them a lot of optimism. We heard a lot in the offseason from Kalen, the players, the staff, how this was going to be different, and there was more of a comfort level, and people understood what the expectations were, what his approach was and wasn't. And I think fans now think back to that and they wonder, was that just talk? Or have we just not had enough time to see that take effect? Well, when you go on the road against a Florida State in the first game, and you're coming off a season, certainly 3 of the last 4 games last year, where your performance was just not very good at all, then it's probably only fair. I don't want to beat up on the fans and the donors at Alabama either. It's probably only fair that the most rational person says, no, wait a minute. This isn't 1 game. This isn't 2 games. This is a number of games where we've looked like this. And this is the next season where you've had an off season, to quote unquote fix it. So I think it's, I do think there are a lot of people that are genuinely concerned about what they've seen and what happens from here. I don't have a crystal ball. I do know that having gotten to know Kalen and a lot of people who are close to him, who've coached with him and coached against him, everybody holds him in the highest regard as not just a man. Okay, we're not talking about the type of human being Kalen is. We're talking about the kind of football coach he is. And I don't know anybody who tells me that he is not a smart, established, proven football coach. He hasn't just forgotten how to coach overnight, but this is a new challenge at a new place in a new part of the country. And sometimes that takes longer than people want to admit. I don't think they're a team that are lacking talent, Mick. Now they are without 2 of their best players right now. I'll give you that. But this is a football team that's got a lot of really good players, and they should be playing better than they are. Can he get them to do that? They've got 2 games. They've got East Tennessee State. Excuse me. They got the game this weekend. And then
Louisiana Monroe. And then
I meant to say Monroe. Maybe we shouldn't mention Monroe and Alabama in the same breath, given that Nick lost to him his first year. But, you got Wisconsin coming in there. I think these are 2 games you're going to see Alabama roll out there and play dominant football. I'd be very, very surprised if Alabama does not play at the top of its game and win convincingly these next 2 weeks. But then, to me, this is where we start to find out. Maybe to a long-winded way of answering your question. They got a week off. Georgia also has a week off. They got 2 weeks to prepare for their trip to Georgia. And I think that's when we start to find out, okay, is this team rounding into shape? Is this team recovered from what's plagued them against the Georgia team on the road, who, by the way, never loses at home? I think the last time Georgia lost at home under Kirby, Reagan was still in office. Of course, I jest, but it's been a long time. So what do they do with that extra week? How do they look these next 2 weeks? But what do they do with that extra week is they go in to play Georgia on the road. And I think we have a lot more answers as we flip the calendar then into October about what Alabama is, what they aren't, if Kalen's been able to get through to the guys. And here's the other thing. I think guys on this team need to take some accountability. They need to, and I think they were. I mean, in my time around them, they were policing each other. But, boy, that needs to step up, because if you're leaders, if you're counting on your head coach, and this is where Alabama was so good under Nick, is he had that leadership council. He had that group of guys, Nick needed to step in and say something, he did, but those guys are the ones that police the football team. And I think that's something to watch for now as we go forward. Are there enough guys, enough strong-willed, tough-minded leaders on this football team who are going to police each other and make sure they're playing to the standard that they all expect to play at?
Wow. Yeah. It's not like Alabama's the only team that lost. And I will say this. I saw this coming, but at the same time, part of it is that it was a tough game from the beginning. Florida State has new coordinators that are really good. Their offensive coordinator was a head coach and left to be the offensive coordinator. A whole new team of really good players. So it's not like you could go on film and look at them. Bama had the rat poison aspect too. 91% chance they were going to win. 14 point favorite in the game. Like everything that teams that are undisciplined, like Kalen DeBoer's Alabama has been, are going to fall for that, right? And they did. Now, with that said, you always improve the most between week 1 and week 2. And you go into Tallahassee, that's a tough place to play. I'm glad that we saw some teams, and I'm going to talk about some other teams here, that did what Alabama did. And I hope that the committee that picks these teams for the college football playoff appreciate what we got, because Alabama didn't have to play them. They could have played East Tennessee State. They could have played Chattanooga, but instead they decided to play Florida State, and they have Wisconsin on the schedule along with the SEC. How about how cool it was to see Texas play Ohio State? And, even though Arch Manning wasn't great in the football game, it still gave us as college football fans something to go out there and watch. What did you think about that one? That was another big one. You said you were at the Battle of the Death Valleys for the two Tigers, the LSU Tigers and the Clemson Tigers. Your thoughts first on Ohio State beating Texas and then LSU against Clemson.
We in the media, Mick, are the worst in the world when it comes to overreaction after week 1. I've been guilty of that. I've tried to temper that the last few years, but man, we are way out there, yay and nay, after 1 week of football. No, I'm not ready to write Arch off as a bust after one game. I don't think LSU's defense is the 1985 Chicago Bears. I don't think Clemson is done, and we're not going to hear from them again. Nor do I think, as we just talked about, that it's time to pull the plug on Kalen DeBoer after one game. This is what I think. I felt going into the season that it would be a really up and down type of deal, that there'd be some teams some weeks that look great, some teams wouldn't look as great. I felt like there was not one or two or three teams that you could point to and say, this team is definitely going to be in the Final Four or definitely going to be one of the top 3 teams in college football. I just had this feeling, and talking to people, going around the country, doing my homework, that it was going to be a wide swath of teams that had a chance to win it all this year. We didn't know. I didn't know that LSU would be as good and as disruptive on defense as they were in week 1. I knew they spent a lot of money to bring in guys on defense, but to perform the way they did, I didn't know that Harold Perkins would be that healthy. He certainly looks like Harold Perkins looked a few years ago when he was dominant. I didn't know what Julian Sayin would play like at Ohio State. I didn't know that Ohio State would be able to replace all the guys they did on defense. They lost a ton of guys on defense off that national title team. They brought a few key guys back, but they were outstanding on defense. And here's the other thing we don't know. Is Texas going to grow from that, or are they going to be limited against the better teams on offense? Arch looked, I mentioned hesitant about Alabama. Arch looked hesitant, looked a little lost at times. They're going to have to get him going, certainly. That's, right? They're going to have to get him going to be the kind of team they're going to need to be to get in the playoff and make some noise in the playoff. I also thought, as I looked around the country, that the SEC, I still believe, will be a hodgepodge of teams losing 1 week and winning the next. I don't think it's going to be out of the realm, Mick, for a team like Arkansas, a team like Florida, a team like Arkansas, and I said Arkansas, a team like Florida, maybe even Mississippi State, Vandy, to beat some of those upper echelon teams this year, just like last year. It happened last year. I think it's going to happen again. And is that good for the SEC? I don't know. I think it's good for college football because it makes the sport more interesting. And I want to end on this, man. You absolutely hit a grand slam. I hope and pray we never get away from what we saw last week, and that's teams going to other teams' campuses and playing. That just whets everyone's appetite. I think it really is the way to go into college, football season. And it just makes the sport better. It makes it more interesting. And you know what? If Bama does what I thought Bama was going to do before the season, and I still think they've got a chance to do, if they can right the ship, that loss to Florida State's not going to kill them. Mm-hmm. Same with Clemson. Clemson, that loss to LSU, probably even more so than Alabama because Clemson's schedule is not as hard as Alabama's the rest of the way. But that loss to LSU is not going to kill them. So kudos to those teams for playing those games. And let's hope, again, we don't get away from it because that's the fabric of the sport is Clemson playing LSU, Texas playing Ohio State, Florida State, Alabama. I want to see more of those, in fact, as we go forward.
Amen, man. Amen. Tell people how they can find you at On3 now. And I love our conversations each week, Chris.
Yeah, you just go to on3.com and got a great team, man. Brett McMurphy, Pete Nakos, Andy Staples, Ari Wasserman, and all the great guys and gals at all the team sites, not only at On3, but Rivals. I mean, if you're a football fan, man, you got to get up every morning and go to On3 Sports.
Guys, don't forget that we will be at Innisfree on Friday for the tailgate show. Jay Coker and I, every Alabama-Tuscaloosa home game, we go to Innisfree from 1 to 3 on Friday. So come by and hang out with us and Chris when he's in town. Maybe we can get him there as well. But check Chris's workout at On3 and roll tide, everybody. Hey, let's watch Coker.
I may not suit up on Saturdays anymore, but I'm still in the game. In here, I call the plays, make adjustments, and lay it on the line. Want to feel that fire, that rush? Then you've got to get in the game. I used to say it in the tunnel, and I still say it now. Let's roll.